Jacqueline, Catalina, and Jen. So good to see you joining in as well. So this evening, Ayya Soma will be speaking about spiritual activism. So perhaps she can explain what exactly she means by that. And you're welcome to type in questions at any time, and I'll read them out for you, her to answer at the end. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Bante. So I don't know what I mean by spiritual activism because actually you wrote that blurb a long time ago. So I will just be sharing my thoughts on it. So all of you, I think, have kind of somewhat met Stan during these live streams. Stan is our lovely black cat resident of Empty Cloud Monastery. And we were talking about just this morning with our resident May, who has been taking care of him in the past 24 hours, and sometimes also in the past, of how he's so cute but also so obnoxious, and that he kept her up last night and woke her up at like 2 a.m. Wanting to storm out of the room and walking on top of her and like being really obnoxious. And then the realization that she still loves him, still cares for him, but she would not accept the same treatment by any human. It's only Stan the cat that gets a pass. So if I would wake up May at 2 a.m., walk on top of her body, start yelling at the door, etc., she would be a little bit unhappy. So her very wise realization was a question to Bante this morning, actually after the live stream. I wish she had asked live, but I'll paraphrase now. She was like, so are we supposed to look and deal with all human beings in the way that I look and deal with Stan when he does obnoxious things? And the answer was, of course, yes, by Bante. And it was great because actually I had thought exactly the same thing a few hours beforehand. Because in fact, Stan is so cute and so adorable and so sweet. But it's also very interesting because there are so many people who are so cute, so lovely, and so sweet, but also so extremely obnoxious. And when they do one obnoxious thing, then that takes over the entire sort of aspect, the entire sphere, the entire essence of their being in our eyes. That's the only thing that we can see, that we can remember. And it's very difficult to overcome it. It's very difficult to forgive them. And we kind of just toss all the goodness, focus on the unwholesomeness, and keep a sort of grudge for it. Very difficult to forgive them, very difficult to treat them like Stan, which after 2 seconds you're already like, oh, that was annoying, but oh well. I understand that he's a cat. I understand that it's in his nature to sometimes be very adorable and sometimes be very defiled. Sometimes to have a mind full of loving kindness for the residents, and sometimes having a mind full of greed, hatred, and delusion that he expresses through actions towards the residents. So we understand his experience, hence we're more open to forgiving them. So isn't it interesting how we are more ready to understand a cat than we are to our fellow humans? Even though we have a few more things in common with humans than cats, namely similar body, similar language, similar ways of going around, clothing, namely. Yeah, whenever Stan looks at the residents putting clothing on or off, he's always like weirded out. These humans, what are they doing? Or when we start cleaning, what the hell? Such a waste of time. So bizarre. Why are they cooking? Weird. So we have lots of things in common with fellow humans, yet it's more difficult to understand them. So why am I talking about cats and Stan, etc.? What does that have to do with activism? You were probably asking. You're like, okay, that's a cute story, but what about activism? And the reason why I brought this up was because of the theme of understanding things as they are. So it's something that whenever we go about in the world, there's lots of injustice, there's lots of awful things that we see. One of them, really strong one, we are all experiencing throughout the world altogether, which is obviously the pandemic. And there's lots of different causes and conditions that have brought up the pandemic. There's lots of causes and conditions that have brought up climate change. There's lots of causes and conditions where there's, oppression of people for different traits, different statuses throughout the world. But all of these causes and conditions, they all have in common humans. And it can be very hurtful to read or see or experience either oppression, either the destruction, not destroyment, right? The environment, or lots of different upsetting things. And so if you're a little bit like me, the natural instinct is indignation. The natural instinct is to get very angry about the situation. The natural instinct is to hate the people who are oppressing others. The natural instinct is to hate the people who are oppressing us, if we're the ones being oppressed. The natural instinct is to hate the people who are destroying the environment. Whoever it is, there seems to be a common denominator of hatred for both the experience and the perpetrator. And it's something that I have to, and I still am actually working to some degree or the other, but I have to say that now I'm working more on a sort of, it's kind of like if you have an entire yard that is completely full of weeds and and you don't even know where to start. So that was when I got into Buddhist practice, and now I've started identifying the weeds that are harmful. I started identify the plants that are actually good for the soil. I started understanding what it is that needs to be grown in a particular environment, etc., etc. So I have a clear understanding of the situation, and part of the yard is looking fine. It's looking really great, but then some other it's only been cut partially, or sort of landscaped partially and planted really well, so we're waiting for the fruits to arise, and some other is still a disaster. So this is my experience of practice right now as an unenlightened being with a bit of right view, thanks to Bhattacharya, but ultimately to the Buddha and all the different monastics that we've had here coming to Buddhist insights. So it's understanding from this experience the current situation, the current reaction. What is our instinctive reaction, and what is the practice that the Buddha tells us to do? What is the teachings of the Buddha in relation to what we're experiencing? And a lot of times, actually, I have to say I've had a bit of frustration, not necessarily at Buddhist insights, but outside in the world, where there's outside in the world of in the Buddhist world, not just outside in the world, where Buddhist practice is presented a lot of times as something, as an inactive practice, a practice of inaction, of just accepting sort of samsara for what it is and not actually doing anything about it. And I would say that the part of acceptance is what I understand the teachings of the Buddha to be of. But I don't see anything about not doing something about it. Actually, quite the opposite. And acceptance and understanding the workings of the mind. So understanding that, for example, when we encounter violence, our reaction is of violence. So just as it's outside, just as the violence is outside, the violence is also appearing inside. So it's kind of like the outside is always a mirror of the inside, and the inside can also be a mirror of the outside. They're not separated, but rather interconnected. So we kind of have to understand, first of all, that it is in our nature, in the nature of human beings, to have greed, hatred, and delusion. And with Buddhist practice, we're actually trying to go against nature, which was something that at the very beginning of my path, I had a bit of was one of the quarrels that I would always have with Bhattacharya. So going, it is natural to suffer. And he's like, yes, also, what is it? The plant, the poisonous plant that you like to quote? Hemlock. He was like, yeah, also hemlock is natural, but that doesn't mean you actually want to take hemlock and kill yourself, with hemlock and poison yourself. So very important to understand how something is natural, is present, and how we are, by doing this practice, going against the streams. So we're trying to, first of all, see the picture, see that this is the nature of samsara, really fully understand that what we are experiencing is not new, that all the tragedies that are currently happening in the world are not new. They've been happening since endless, beginningless time, just in different shapes and form. Yet, we should be doing something about it. Yet, we can do something about it. And we can do something about it both as individuals, by removing the violence inside of ourselves, by removing the pollution inside of ourselves, and consequentially outside of us, by really seeing, what can I contribute to this world? How can I actually make a difference for others? Instead of expecting for things to be already fixed, for things to be already perfect, for expecting for things to be really good. And also watching our mind and seeing, so if there's this instinctive anger towards the products of anger, how is this wholesome? How is this bringing to the dispelling of anger? It's kind of like saying, oh, this house is all red, it's terrible, let me splash some more red on it. It's not very, very rational, is it? But if we start looking at our experience behind that anger, actually, there is critical thinking. There is the understanding, the acknowledgement that something is unwholesome. So we think a lot of times there's this wrong thinking that the anger somehow gives energy to that, like the acknowledgement that something is wrong, and that without the energy of anger, we can't do anything about the problem. But in reality, what the Buddha says is quite the opposite. That instead of using the energy of anger, we can actually use better and more wholesome energy that really does something about the problem, which is the energy of compassion, the energy of loving kindness. And when we approach that through this channel rather than the channel of anger, instead of pouring more red on the red, we actually can start painting it white or blue or whatever we think it's needed. We have all the energy there. We can count on the reservoir of wholesome intentions, wholesome emotions that come from understanding and listening to understanding the situation that we're experiencing and listening to the people that we are interacting with, and being more willing, more helpful. No different than when we relate to Stan. Stan has this big allergy, that skin allergy. So then instead of like harboring all this hatred towards him for being sometimes irritable and not particularly nice, etc., we can then just go like, oh, how can I help him be less irritable? How can I help him alleviate his allergy? So then his mind makes more room for wholesomeness, for happiness. So it's very difficult, obviously, to do that, especially if we are either the victims of some sort of oppression, or if we're assisting others that we care about being the victims of the oppressor. Very, very difficult. But I'll share, but it's also like very relieving once we are skillful at it, we're successful at it. So I'll share a brief story of, or I'll try to make it short anyway, of when I actually managed to get it right. A lot of times I still get it wrong because I do suffer from righteous indignation, but sometimes, thanks to this practice, thanks to practicing over and over and over again, then I don't even have to try. It comes like second nature to practice in accordance to the Buddhist teachings. So I'll give you a practical example of how understanding can bring brightness to the mind and also strength to our experience. And so a lot of you probably are aware that being a female monastic ordained in Buddhism can be very wonderful, exciting, gratifying for so many different reasons, but also sometimes a little bit difficult. There's a little bit of actually quite a lot of discrimination, quite a lot of unhappiness in certain respects for certain people that are not particularly happy that we're practicing in this form. And when I started practicing, I was actually completely unaware of this. So I was very naive, coming in a little bit Pollyanna, like, oh yes, I just want to practice, meditation and become enlightened, da 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 da. And then I opened this Pandora's box, and it was very interesting to see all the different ideas and opinions of why we should not exist or we should not be practicing, etc., blah blah blah. That You can research and Google it online if you're interested. But anyway, because I have also a different situation than a lot of female monastics, my experience as a monastic is quite great. It's quite peaceful because I live in a little bubble. Bante Sudhasu and I started this organization 4 years ago, and it's pretty progressive and liberal. So, so I don't have to experience a lot of things. But a lot of times this privilege also comes through the fact that he is of the male gender. And so when we are together running this organization, it kind of comes by osmosis. So last summer, we were going every day on alms rounds to Union Square. And at a certain point, Bante Sudhasu went to Taiwan. Actually, in the spring, we were going to spring and summer to go on alms rounds. And then in the summer, he went for the Vasa to Taiwan. So he left. And at a certain point, I went with another female monastic who came to visit us for a week from California, and we went on alms rounds. And at a certain point, someone stopped us and started asking us questions: where we were ordained, where we are not ordained, etc., and like how was this, and what were we doing? And it turned out that he was from a place in Southeast Asia. And was the first time that he was seeing female monastics, and he wasn't particularly happy about this encounter. So he got extremely angry. So all of a sudden, after approaching us and asking us questions and verifying that we identified as monastics, as Buddhist monks, he got this huge rush, I still remember, in his face, and started yelling at us that we were fake monks and that we should stop doing whatever we were doing, over and over again. It was a big scene in Union Square. And I remember for the first time, actually, like I remember looking at him, and in the past I would have, or not sometimes, in other circumstances, I would have had a similar anger appearing in my mind, and sort of righteous indignation going like, the hell, what did I do to deserve this? I mean, I renounced so many things to go around like this. Like, why can't I just practice? What is wrong with you? Why are you humiliating us in front of all these people here? Also because there are actual fake monks in New York City. So then everybody was thinking that we were the fake monks. So there were a lot of different layers besides the whole gender issue. So either my mind would have responded with a similar anger, or would have responded with at least some self-pity, like, oh, poor me, that is awful. Why am I like, I would have maybe started crying and be really upset. And instead, my mind veered towards really feeling sorry for him. Really fully understanding that the reason why he was reacting so strongly was actually, first of all, because he was very, very attached to Buddhism, to the form of Buddhism that he was born in, found lots of values in the teachings, was perceiving us as impersonators, as people who are stealing these teachings and trying to take advantage of the teachings in order to get something back. And from this story, he was basically poisoning himself. From this story that he had created in his mind, his experience in there was of extreme distress. And because I understood fully this experience in that moment, there was no space for anger. There was no space for self-cherishing. There was only space for concern for his well-being. There was only space, room for compassion. And also then space for wisdom to arise, to understand that in that moment, the appropriate response was to wish him to be well and happy and to go away, to step aside, not to say anything back, not to reason, not to try to convince him that his story was wrong. Just to leave, because that was what was appropriate in that moment. And I remember that episode clearly, not necessarily because of the unhappy sort of circumstances, not in terms of like, oh, it's so difficult being a female monk, but rather such a great teaching, an opportunity to strengthen my faith for the triple gem, for the Dhamma, for the teachings of the Buddha. Because in that moment, I was actually practicing in accordance to Dhamma, and there was no suffering in my mind. And it's just such an incredible feeling, because then that creates so much room for skillful actions, for really then understanding, okay, so now I am in the situation of the oppressed, but I'm pretty sure that this is not the first encounter that I had with this man, that probably I was the oppressor in previous lives. And that in this moment, I was able to break the cycle. In this moment, I didn't have to play the victim and him the persecutor. And then in the next life, or in the next few years, I can be the oppressor. In the next few moments, if I had shouted at him, I would have been the oppressor and him the oppressed. So the relief of breaking that cycle, but also the understanding of, well, how can I actually relieve the suffering of others around me too? How can I remove the pollution in my mind in order to help remove the pollution outside as well? How can I create an organization with Bhante that does not support the oppression of people? How can this organization be of benefit also to other organizations? How can my life be of purpose to the Dhamma? And then this creates so much spaciousness to actually work even on small things, but that you can actually have an impact on, which means it's not that now just because we exist or I exist or anyone exists or this thought exists, that now we've solved all the issues of women in Buddhism. But just the fact that we're doing things in a certain way means that there's a little bit of something that we could contribute. So it's always, I guess, my version of spiritual activism and my sort of stream of consciousness. I had a beautiful quote from Thich Nhat Hanh that always, whenever I write quotes, I never end up reading them. But yeah, the version of, I guess, my idea of spiritual activism is that of really, really looking at how can we purify our minds, how can we practice in accordance to Dhamma by always being committed also to change the outside, changing outside by changing ourselves, and changing ourselves while changing the outside world. But not like an empty platitude, but really actually doing the work, really actually looking at our sort of emotional markup in every single moment, and always looking for opportunities to benefit others instead of opportunities to get upset, or opportunities to cultivate greed, hatred, and delusion. Cultivate opportunities to find opportunities to cultivate wholesomeness while acknowledging that something is not going quite right, is completely apt. But no inaction, that causes indifference. All right, so that's all that I have to share.
Okay. Thank you, Ayya. At this time, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the live chat. We already have quite a number of questions and comments. So I'll go ahead and start reading through what we've got here. So Marielle says, right now we are experiencing not only the threat of COVID in the island, but also gas coming from multiple fires in one of the biggest dump sites in the country. I know we are not supposed to kill if following the Buddha's example, but when death is threatening you from multiple angles, what should you do?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you're experiencing multiple issues all at the same time. It is a pretty difficult time these days. But once again, that was a Stan's cameo. Once again, understanding that all violence is an injustice. So all the episodes that you have described are descriptions of violence, are descriptions of injustice. So responding with other violence, responding with other injustice. It's not solving the problem, it's just fueling the problem. It's just creating crisis over crisis over crisis. So my humble suggestion is just to see how can you be of help in your immediate household, in your immediate neighborhood, in your immediate town, wherever you are, whatever is in your capabilities to do, then try and do it. This is what we've been trying to do at this place as well during the pandemic. We're like, well, we have very little resources, very few resources. What can we do? So then we kind of sort of investing in the right stocks, investing in something that you know actually can be successful instead of wasting lots of time and energy in getting upset, time and energy in getting angry, time and energy in doing something really awful, like creating the conditions for murder or further death, that then will create an endless chain of death. So that's my understanding of the Buddhist teachings. And that's what has brought happiness to my mind. I spent many, many years as a lay person with lots of afflictive states. And I was involved in lots of different activities to try to make the world a better place, so to speak. And I thought I was able to act to a certain degree, but actually I feel like now through Buddhist practice and as a monastic, I'm having a better sort of impact, not because of anything, but simply because of the practice, simply because actually I'm putting more energy in what I can do rather than trying to do what I can't do and being upset that I can't do things and having the whole weight of the world on my shoulders. That's awful. So ready, you put it down and you do something. Focus on right action rather than wrong thinking.
Okay, thank you. And Jen has a question. She says, I recently heard a monk refer to cats as vicious, murderous beings. And the concept of pets is wrong. I don't think I said the concept of pets is wrong, but the first part about murderous beings, I might have said that. She continues, I was deeply saddened because I care for and take in stray cats. And of course, they have brought to me birds and little mice, which I feel bad for and usually bury. But are the cats accumulating bad karma? I now feel bad for the cats. Isn't it just nature? Surely they don't have murderous intent?
Well, they definitely have murderous intent. So if you observe Stan, I love Stan, the cat that is here, but he's utterly terrifying whenever he's around a creature that is smaller than him. I always said that had I been smaller than him, he would have like killed me by now. Like there is no, without a doubt, he becomes completely like a psychopath. When he's outside, not outside, when he's by the window looking at the birds outside, he has a devilish look. At a certain point, Mara possesses him and he starts like pretending fake chirping, like trying to like kill them, but they're outside and he can't get them. And once that the window was open, he actually did get them. So yeah, it's good to not pretend that they're cute little sweet beings. They also are cute, sweet little beings, but they're also murderous killers. So it's absolutely true. And that's very important to see it also in ourselves and fellow beings. So the idea in Buddhism is that actually it's not that they're also to a certain extent creating bad karma while killing. But actually, it's the sort of bad karma to begin with that they've made as in other forms of existence that has created an animal rebirth, where they are in this constant state of dukkha without having to, with this constant state of suffering without any way out. So it's actually interesting because when you observe Stan, you'll see that he's full of greed, hatred, and delusion, but he's also like kind of wise in some like a sort of understanding. He has an idea of his condition. He understands. I chase greed. I chase this like. I chase this like. But he has no way out. He gets bored. Then he finds very erratic. Very similar, actually, to me before the Buddhist teachings. No way out. No way out. He can't understand the Dharma. So he has no idea that there's a way out of the suffering that he's experiencing. So fundamentally, cats are just going to, just like any other animal, are exhausting their sort of unwholesome karma, and then they will have a different rebirth in the future. And you're doing a great thing of taking care of stray cats, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. In terms of pets, yes. It's a weird sort of topic. I am not pro pets. I'm pro rescue animals, though. So giving a home to rescue animals, I think it's a very good thing. But going to the shop and to a breeder to get animals, I think it's a little bit questionable, the ethics.
So Jen confirms that it was Venerable Yuttadhammo.
It looks like Bhante Sudaso, but they're different.
Okay. Next. Marielle said she thinks this might be one of the talks she likes the most.
Oh.
It's very sweet. Gabriella says, people kind of forget that there's always something we can do. Charity, moral conduct, honoring the honorable, rendering service, sharing merit, rejoicing in merit, listening to Dhamma, teaching Dhamma, straightening out our views. Meditation isn't the only way to cultivate goodness in the world. All of these are forms of activism. And she says, Ayya, what do you think are other ways I didn't mention that are the proper way to practice spiritual activism in line with Dhamma, which can remain apolitical?
Well, it depends on what you mean by apolitical. So opening a communist retreat center or a socialist retreat center or a right-wing retreat center, that's one way to intend political. But political can also just mean, creating some sort of larger change. What is the actual definition of political?
I'll look it up while you continue talking.
So, I don't remember now the list because you had a very long list of things to do. So now I don't remember which one you didn't mention, but there are like endless ways to do things. And one really needs to be honest with themselves and kind of understand, what can I contribute to the world?
So this definition says political means relating to the government or the public affairs of a country.
Mm-hmm. And then,
another one, the set of activities associated with the governance of a country, state, or area.
okay, so maybe apolitical. Well, but also the governance. I mean, the Buddha always had, we can get now in a gray territory, but a lot of times the Buddha actually gave recommendations and suggestions to royalty, to the kings, so that created significant political implications. So can you repeat the list that she said? I don't remember anymore.
Oh, one sec. Charity, moral conduct, honoring the honorable, rendering service, sharing merit, rejoicing in merit, listening to Dhamma, teaching Dhamma, straightening out views.
Yeah. These are all great things, but also we can do actions. So right now during the pandemic, if you can, I don't know, like do go grocery shopping for older people, or get the community together to help one another, fundraise for hospitals. A friend of mine put together this incredible fundraiser. They're a bunch of artists with no money. They raised $1 million for the hospital in Elmhurst just by doing online gathering and selling. All the artists donated a picture, a photo, and the photos were $150. Big shout out to Pictures for Elmhurst and Samantha, my friend Samantha. So she's Italian, so she was very distressed from Italy, but she lives here in New York, and she just got it together. And she was like, what can I do? I am locked inside my home. I can't do anything. I can't go outside and help people in one shape or form. I know how to take pictures. I've taken pictures. I have other photographer friends. This is what I have currently available. So let me find a creative and skillful way to be of benefit to others. So there's not one single way that we can do things, but we can think about our current situation, our current resources, and find a way to do that.
Okay. Then Marielle says, what if it is a mosquito that can kill you? I think this is a follow-up on the question about what to do when something is endangering you.
So what is your suggestion? What is your answer?
Okay, and James asks, how can we keep helping people who tell us repeatedly they hate our lifestyles?
Oh, repeat again. What can we?
How can we keep helping people who tell us repeatedly they hate our lifestyles?
Oh, that's the relationship I've had with my parents basically for the past 5 years. Actually, for pretty much my adult life, but significantly concentrated since I started a Buddhist organization and when I became a monastic. So once again, actually, this is a great example. At the very beginning, my reaction towards my parents was, well, you should accept my life decisions. So they would get angry, say really unhelpful things, and I would get angry back and say unhelpful things, and it was very difficult to communicate. In fact, we didn't speak for one entire year, actually. It was pretty intense, especially if you're Italian. I mean, not Anglo-Saxon. For non-Anglo-Saxon people, not speaking with your parents for even like longer than a week, it's a big deal, let alone a year. So it got to a point of non-return, it seemed. And then as my practice matured, I started understanding actually that, for example, my family was a mirror of myself. That just as I thought that they were using harsh speech with me, just as I thought they were unreasonable, just as I thought they were not kind, not understanding, not loving, they thought the same about me. And I started seeing clearly and clearly and clearly more into this mirror and altering the way that I was relating to them. And the more you respond with sort of kindness or with without losing your temper, without losing your peace and calm, the more actually the person that you're talking to cannot play ping pong with you anymore. So it takes two people to get the ball going, right? So if one of them stops, then the other person for a little while will keep on like, throwing the ball at you and trying to hit it and see if you can play back. Then after a while, they'll lose momentum. And that's actually how we start impacting the world through our action, by leading by example. So now the conversations with my parents are incredibly pleasant. It's really lovely to talk to them. I've been talking to them almost every day since the pandemic started. And it's an incredible shift. I don't think I've ever had this relationship with my parents since the age of 6. So, or 4 or 5, I don't know. Since I don't remember anymore.
So Peng Li points out, even the great Sariputta had to deal with his mother who didn't approve of him being a monk. So you're in good company.
Great. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So still lots of questions.
Okay, I'll try to give some answers.
Gabriela asks, there are people willing to hijack Dhamma for their own political, national, or geopolitical goals. How do we prevent the kind of actions that spurred massacre of people like the Rohingya?
Can you do something about it? Well, first of all, I would say that when it comes to if we're not actually Burmese, and if we're not the Rohingya, then it's a little bit difficult to have a full, clear understanding of what's going on. So there's that to keep in mind too. Is there something that is in our control to do? Like being quite honest. If there is, then do something about it. If there isn't, then try and focus on something else where you can actually have an impact on. So we don't have to go all the way to the other side of the world to find oppression of some sort. We can go 2 blocks away from here. Or probably actually like the house next door. It's just that I don't know what's happening in the house next door. But I'm pretty sure, I know that 2 blocks away from here, there's a lot of discrimination. There's a lot of problems that are happening. Maybe not exactly two blocks from here, maybe 8, 10. So there's a lot of systemic oppression. This country is full of systemic racism. So we can go and see in our back door what we can do, whether or not it's related to Dhamma. But also there's a lot of co-option of Dharma here in the West. So once again, maybe we should look at what our culture is doing. How are convert Buddhists, how are us convert Buddhists dealing with the Dharma? How are we sometimes taking it and commodifying it, taking advantage of it for personal gain? So instead of thinking what Buddhist countries are doing, whether skillfully or unskillfully, let's look at our own backyard and do something about what is in our backyard.
Okay. And then Jen asks, also the issue of cat fleas came up during that discussion. How do you deal with those without killing?
Well, so you can put apple cider vinegar on. That's what Stan is currently on. Apple cider vinegar, not going outside. There's lots of different natural treatments. So just looking at that, I will be quite frank. Once you start taking care of an animal, which is why it's not recommended actually in Buddhist practice, unfortunately, there will be a time where you'll have to make uncomfortable decisions. So here, right now, at the monastery, we're not in that situation, and I hope we won't. We won't be. But we'll have to decide. That is fully clearly seeing what you're doing. If you decide to kill fleas, check your intention. Do you want to kill the fleas or do you want to help the cat? And if you decide to help the cat by killing the fleas, stay focused on the intention that it's helping the cat, but also be quite aware and do not create any delusion at all. You are killing lots of sentient beings. So take that karma, make that action, be fully aware of the karmic consequences that will be mixed, both positive consequences of wanting to protect a sentient being and unwholesome consequences of harming others in order to protect that sentient being. And trying to avoid that as much as possible. But when you will be put in that situation, and as a lay person, unfortunately, you will be put in that because you don't take as many precepts as monastics do. Then try to make the most wholesome and forgive yourself for doing the unwholesome, but don't delude yourself that there is not an unwholesome part of it.
Okay, then Bradley asks, could you explain a bit the difference between wise compassion and foolish compassion?
Yeah, absolutely. So foolish compassion is you're trying to help a heroin addict, and the heroin addict goes, I really need a dose. I really need a dose. I really need a dose. I'm going to die if I don't have a dose. And then you go and get a dose and give it to him. So you're not helping the heroin addict. You're not helping the person. You're just contributing to the problem. So the wise compassion is actually understanding how you can be of benefit to that person and perhaps going, okay, now we're going to go to the hospital and you're going to deal with the situation. Now I'm going to bring you to a group that can help you. So without judging, without going, oh, you terrible drug addict, you suck, you should be better than that. Oh, like, why are you doing this? Without being angry that they are addicted. Understanding that you too are addicted, just perhaps not on this substance, but perhaps you're addicted to vanilla ice cream, or perhaps you're addicted to other types of sensual pleasure of one shape or form that don't have also very strong physical addiction, like the heroin addiction. So really fully understanding that whatever that person is going through is no different than what you're going through, and looking at what is beneficial for them, what is that they need rather than what they want. Because what they want, the majority of people think that what they want is what they need. But wanting and needing is two completely different things. You want McDonald's junk food, but you need spinach and grilled tofu. That was great. Sado. Bradley brought some delicious dana today, so
Then there embarked many pages of discussion about the proper way to handle stray cats.
Okay. Good
including debates as to whether or not it's ethical to allow cats to go outside or not.
Okay, we're gonna skip that as well.
Yes. Um, uh, Pages and pages on the cat discussion. Let's see. I'm trying
I
to
love
sift out.
that you are all animal lovers. That's great. Cat lovers. Cats are great.
Uh,
Also, Stan has
uh,
made lots of great good karma. So if you're a meditator, you actually create great conditions for the cat to make really good karma by getting involved with you in meditation and also teaching you. For example, Stan has taught many people how to do metta here at the monastery by sitting on their laps while they were meditating. He's also taught many people to stay still while meditating because he sits on the legs. And so lots of great karma.
okay, so Mariel asked, does the Buddha mention in any sutta how a country should be ruled?
Ooh, yes, he gives um, a lot of suggestions actually to the king that Bhante actually is an encyclopedia. So Bhante should. How about you answer this question? So it will be short. Otherwise, it will take me like half hour.
Well, there's actually a great sutta where the Buddha talks about how to prevent crime in a country. And he says the way you prevent crime is to give money to the poor people, make sure the farmers have all the supplies they need, make sure that the tradesmen and craftsmen have access to the materials for their trade, and so on. So the Buddha actually seems to be encouraging a strong social welfare network. Again, I'm not really quite sure where this idea comes from that Buddhism has absolutely no overlap whatsoever with politics. Also, the Buddha praised the Lichavi Republic, and there's some places in the suttas where he goes on at length about the many reasons why he saw the Lichavi Republic as being such a praiseworthy form of government. Again, the Buddha actually was quite willing to point out when forms of politics were wholesome or forms of politics were unwholesome. And actually, Bradley has a comment on this as well. He says, everything we do in our community has political implications because it affects the world at large. Being compassionate is political insofar as it's a rejection of violence and hatred. And he says, I think the more important thing is how do we approach our actions, from delusion or from wisdom?
Sadhu, can you copy and paste that comment? It's really beautiful. I like it.
Okay, so congratulations, Bradley. You've just entered into the quote list. Okay. Let's see if I can dig out some more questions from the flood of comments about cats and so on. Here's another question. Sally asks, if someone's goal is awakening, isn't the best way to train samadhi and sati through meditation? When I am in activities, sati is much weaker than in meditation. That's why I attach to meditation.
When I am in meditation, when I'm
in activities. I think she means like
activities.
ordinary activities other than meditation.
Yeah, that's why you train yourself in meditation, and then you also do it in activity. So it's not that the Buddha is only enlightened while he's sitting, and then he starts moving, bam, completely unenlightened. So we want to train ourselves to. So basically, actually, what we do on the cushion is just preparatory. Preparatory. Is that English? Preparatory. Preparatory. Very funny accent. Preparatory to everything else that we do. So our sitting practice then informs everything else that we do, how we go about in our lives, how we speak, how we act, what we do for a living, our thoughts, our emotions, every single thing. Meditation is only one component of a broader path that needs to be developed, and every single part of it is essential. And you'll see that the more you cultivate your meditation practice, the more everything else will be nourished and will be informed, and vice versa. The more you actually intentionally think, I'm going to do good for others, I'm going to cultivate, I'm going to do something out of compassion, then the better your meditation practice will be. That's why there's a huge emphasis in Asian Buddhism on cultivating sila, because without a moral mind, it's very difficult to make any progress in meditation. Without giving, one cannot practice renunciation. Without letting go, one can attain anything in meditation practice. So it's mutually dependent.
Okay, and we have one last question. So even though we're running over time, I think maybe we can take one more.
Okay.
What do you think?
Last one.
Okay. Boone asks, if our aim is nekamma, renunciation, and by having a pet, for example, a cat, would make it more difficult, what do you think?
Once again, it depends on how you approach taking care of the animal. So actually, it's quite a huge responsibility taking care for other beings. So there's a lot of renunciation that one needs to do in order to take care of the animal properly. For example, May last night didn't have a great night of sleep. So she had to renounce a good night of sleep in order to take care of Stan. So she could have picked to just kick out the animal, put him in whatever sort of place and not cared about the animals, but instead she decided to practice compassion, equanimity, kindness, and letting go of her personal needs. So that's a lot of renunciation. So if we approach taking care of someone with that attitude, then it's very wholesome. If we approach it as, oh yeah, like I like the cat, oh such a little cute kitty, I'm gonna adopt, oh it's grown, now it's a teenager, oh, it's really annoying, he's kicking everything out, okay, let me bring it to the shelter, oh okay, now I'm gonna get another pet, oh this is cute, oh, okay, well now I have to move from a different apartment, they're not taking pets here, okay, it's a bit of a nuisance, okay, I bring it back to the shelter. So that, then yes, absolutely, it's an obstacle towards awakening, because actually we're just becoming more and more self-obsessed, and while becoming more self-obsessed, we're also making really bad decisions, bad actions.
Okay, thank you. And that's the last question for the night. So thank you, Ayya Soma, for leading us in meditation and in Dhamma discussion. And thank you to all of you who are joining in from all around the world. It's really beautiful to see you morning and night, day after day after day. So I hope we'll see you again tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. New York City time.
With Sutta Study, with Bhante Sudaso, our favorite monk.
I hope so, anyway. So we'll see you soon.
My favorite monk in this room.
Well, my favorite monk is the Buddha.
Oh.
So we'll see you all next time. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.